Hello, my name is George Condon. I am the director, as you could say, of this movie. And I'm here to just tell you about what it's... The movie itself is going to be a basic summary from a list of reputable sources, 5. And everything that you see in this video is, we tried to make it as... The information that comes along with the resources that we made with our actors and our multiple shots of other people and locations and things from the time, or to be thought of to be of the time, we tried our best. And we had fun doing it. But anyway, this is a story about Thomas and a hobo named Leslie. Okay, that's just off the bat. But I'll explain in more detail as I start appropriating a more British-like accent, I suppose. Kind of like this. You usually get used to the narration of that. So I'm going to start to tell you about this. Where shall we start? Oh yeah. Let's start with where it all started off, 1929, the stock market crash. Wait, was it 1829? No, it was 1929. Gotcha. 1929, October 29th, the stock market crash. The Great Depression would not begin to ravage the U.S. economy rapidly, but it would occur after October 29, 1929, known as Black Tuesday, for the stocks began to drop rapidly. This date is not to be confused with Black Thursday on October 24, 1929, of which people like Charlie Mitchell invested in the stocks to decrease the plummeting stock amount. One of the people affected, but not so much, was Thomas Wright, a fictional name, mind you, who was a middle-class worker. He usually worked as a banker, but not to deposit or withdraw money or investments, but to keep everything in order by checking the balances, the accounts, and the stocks. On that fateful day, he was shocked to find the stocks fall and keep decreasing. Everyone running into the bank demanding to pull out their accounts. But once he checked the bank, there was not even a penny, because everything was falling in value. Eventually, Thomas would be out of a job. Some people theorize the stocks fell because of the idea of overproduction and underconsumption. Others say it was because people were using the bank loans to invest and bet on the stocks. If people lost the money, the bank would lose it too.
No worries. I will find a new job, one that suits me again,
said Thomas. Thomas was an optimist. Many people thought the depression would be brief, and that the depression that occurred would be temporary. It would last more than a decade. People like Thomas would become unemployed, and many banks and businesses would close. Even farm values decreased due to the economic depression and the physical drought that was the Dustbowl, where dust storms moved through the Midwest and wreaked havoc on crops and infrastructure. When poverty settled in during 1930 to 1931, after the Federal Reserve attempted to set a monetary base but was too insufficient, many people blamed current President Herbert Hoover, calling rats Hoover dogs, newspapers Hoover blankets, and sums made up of scraps for the homeless Hoovervilles. So after Hoover, Franklin Delano Roosevelt would be elected by a landslide. Promises of economic stability and recovery were made from the said programs that followed: the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the Works Progress Administration, and the Public Works Administration. It was through the Public Works Administration that Thomas would find himself a job. Of course, it wasn't an office job that he was used to, but he had to work through it in order to live through these tough times. It was at this point he met a hobo named Leslie Hughes, also fictional, a farmer who lost his farm in Texas due to a dust storm. He took to a train in New York to find a job and found one under the PWA, just like Thomas, unlike 400,000 people who were now like him that moved to California as a result of the Dust Bowl. But unlike Thomas and Leslie, there were still millions unemployed due to the economic impact of the Depression. This is what the job was like where he was.
No, we'll change that. After that, you work with Leslie over yonder to help build the house, okay?
Alright, angle, height, length.
Feet in length, about 7 feet high.
Yep. Measurements is correct. Time to put up the boards.
That's the top.
Roosevelt wasn't the only person promising better reforms. Huey Long, a Louisiana senator, had the idea for the Share the Wealth program, but was assassinated before his idea would come to fruition. Father Charles Coughlin, a Catholic priest who held similar views on redistributing the wealth, but would in later years steer into fascist ideals and be silenced. Both Long and Coughlin used one thing to spread their work across: the radio, the same radio in which Thomas listened to, hearing optimistic ideas for the future and ongoings of Roosevelt's first New Deal. Thomas would have saved enough money to buy himself a radio, and on this radio he would hear Franklin Delano Roosevelt's inaugural address and fireside chats in the years following 1933.
So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we need to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. But I do have faith, unretained faith.
And the strength of the American people. The first New Deal would be questioned by many, but a few programs stemming from the deal had been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, Schechter v. United States, ruling that the legislative branch, which was Congress, had the power to regulate interstate commerce, not the executive branch, which was the president, deeming the AAA unconstitutional along with the National Industrial Recovery Act and the National Recovery Administration in 1935. Within that same year, the Congress of Industrial Organizations and American Federation of Labor were created. two labor organizations to help lower the growing amounts of strikes across the country by setting up labor unions. During this time, the economy would slowly recover but would still be in decline despite efforts made to raise the monetary value of currency. NIRA's previous wage increase would cause unemployment to continue due to the increasing wages of jobs and the fact employers did not want to pay their workers more. Both Thomas and Leslie were set to work under the Public Works Administration to build many types of infrastructure. Some work led to upstate New York, as there were some long-term PWA projects for schools, airports, hospitals, or other projects made by the PWA which would be further enforced by the Works Progress Administration and the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. This allowed them to both continue their work until Thomas would find a job in another banking firm, as although the Great Depression did cause many banks to close, not all did. For the Social Security Act and the Security Exchange Commission, making sure that bank assets were insured and that the stock market was regulated, this would be when Thomas and Leslie would part ways. Leslie would stay in New York and start a farm, albeit small. His life was aided by the Farm Securities Administration, which helps farmers like him subsidize a certain amount of crop in order for prices of products to stay high to allow them to gain some profit. Back to where Thomas worked in his banking firm, he would be paid a pretty hefty wage due to the Fair Labor Standards Act, but not as much as it mostly affected the industrial workers. After the events of the quote-unquote Third Deal, which was around and after 1938 to 1940, on December 7th, 1941, Japan would bomb Pearl Harbor and bring the U.S. into World War II. A war originally started by Germany in 1933 when they invaded Poland and attacked Belgium. Thomas would be drafted into the army, but not Leslie. Leslie would have been too old to be enlisted in the war, so he purchased a farmstead to produce food to sell for the war effort. It would only be 2 years later that the United States would fully recover from the Great Depression. It'd be around the mid-1940s, with nearly 4 million people entering labor unions as the nation was on the course to set up wartime production. But it would also take 14 years of work that Leslie and Thomas would make to get to this point in their lives. With Thomas enlisting into the largest war has ever seen, and Leslie becoming a farmer, getting profit from supplying the U.S. for the war effort, even though now separated across thousands of miles of water and land, they have survived the worst economic disaster in history, the Great Depression. Thomas would return home as a hero for his efforts. Here was 1945, and because of the new bill passed, which was the Servicemen's Readjustment Bill, or GI Bill, gave financial aid to him to allow him to readjust to society at home and pay for further education. He mainly used it to gain further education at one of the colleges before becoming a banker again in 1949. He would have been 33 years old when World War II started. He would be 41 years old when he worked again. Thomas Wright would pass in 1970 from a fatal stroke at the age of 62. Leslie would have stayed on his property, being able to purchase more land and more workers. The economy would boom in the times where the U.S. was still at war, with it being 1943. From the multiple programs in the U.S. that focused on keeping soil in the Dust Bowl area from drying up, and other administrations helping the farmers, Leslie would move back to Texas to build back his farm. Leslie Hughes would pass in his sleep in 1957 at the age of 72.
Thank you for watching my movie. I'm actually very happy that you watched through all of it. I myself, I didn't know. But we tried our best. We had fun shooting it all. In fact, a few of the scenes I even made myself. But I'm not here to toot my own horn. I'm just here to show you and tell you about history itself. I try my best to, give you what to learn. And if you want to learn about where I got most of my sources, then this annotated bibliography that I have written for each and every single one is good to know. Indeed it is. But now, since the movie is over, I can see that you now have questions, or have an idea of why at the beginning, I didn't feel like wanting to create this movie. Well, I wanted to, but with everything going on, I couldn't. But thankfully, I had very good people who knew my talent and were able to push through to the end. And to that, I thank my parents, my peers, but most importantly, the person who assigned me this assignment, Mr. John Barlow. I'd like to thank you for giving me this assignment to do. And I will now walk away as I drop this paper. Hold on! I want to talk about some more things. Now, of course, with the Great Depression, there are a lot of theories, such as overconsumption, underproduction, and the fact that people, bought on a margin. These theories have been, sufficeably to say, been proven with time, and the fact that history repeats itself from these sources alone. Now, I've only had a brief, selection of things from the Dustbowl that were thankfully brought up in a few of my sources as well. And I'd like to apologize if I misconstrue anything that I know from my own memory to things I have written down in my bibliography. I'd like to apologize if that happens to be what I have done. Now, of course, with all this, I'd like to thank you for watching the movie till the end. With it being, like I said before, it wasn't that well, but everybody tried their best. We did our best. We did as well as we could. We're not Hollywood, and I certainly do not want to, we want to find ways to make it so that we ourselves, bless me, so that we ourselves can have royalty-free content. By that I mean, of course, things without citations. Because imagine if we had to record like 15 citations, even more. But I'm glad that you, my fellow viewer, student, peer, teacher, have watched through this all, and I hope to see you again in the future.